I'm pushing on this, which is going to push the soil blocks out. It takes a little bit of practice when you're new at it, but there you go. I've got 5, 10, 15, 20 soil blocks made just like that. So for today's video, I want to talk about something called soil blocking. It's a different technique of starting seeds. It's becoming more and more popular, but it's been around for 1,000 years. Here's an example of some soil blocks. Soil blocks, as you can see, have no container. There's a little contraption. It's you put the soil mix into, and then you press it down onto a tray, and you make the mix in such a way that it sticks together and holds its shape, and you're able to do it without having a container. So there's some pros and cons to soil blocking. I want to cover a few of those right now. So first of all, there's what's called air pruning. As roots are growing, they're growing typically outward, and they can find oxygen and nutrients and water as they grow. But if they hit the side of a container, like in nursery plants, common nursery plants in the plastic containers, they'll hit that and then they'll turn, and that can cause them to eventually spiral around and become what's called root bound. If you have too many roots growing, or the roots grow for too long in those plastic containers, they'll spiral around. The problem with that is when you go to plant them, the roots don't want to branch out anymore. They're used to being spiraled around and root bound, and they don't have their natural tendency to just explore out. There's some things you can do to mitigate that. You can cut away some of the roots, do some root pruning, do some things to tease the roots out a little bit. But with soil blocks, or with the specialized containers, as the roots grow out toward the sides of the container, in this case, soil blocks don't have a container, there's nothing for them to bump against to. When roots meet direct air, instead of turning and spiraling around and becoming root bound, they stop and send their energy elsewhere, more branches from different roots or starting new roots altogether. So that's called air pruning. They hit air and they no longer grow right there. But again, it's not a bad thing because they are growing roots elsewhere. They're just going to stop that root that's met up with the air. So for soil blocks, that's how it is. It's the edge and it stops growing. There are specialized containers that have slits going up the side, or even their design on how they're angled inside of a tray that does the same sort of air pruning. But with soil blocking, I'm going to focus on that for tonight. Another good advantage for doing soil blocking is there's better oxygenation and airflow to the roots themselves. Roots need oxygen to grow. I've talked about it in other videos how if you overwater or waterlog your plants, then they literally drown. They don't get enough air or oxygen that they need to grow and be healthy. So it's a lot easier to keep that airflow and oxygen to the root system when they are in a soil block. A huge benefit for soil blocks is there's no plastic trays. The crappy flimsy plastic trays that you buy your starts in at the local nursery, and you either reuse them if you're lucky, or they're cracked and broken after just the first season and you have to chuck them because most recycled plants won't take that type of plastic, at least not around here. So it ends up being a big, huge waste of plastic. With soil blocks, you don't have any of that plastic waste, which is a huge benefit. Another good thing about soil blocks is you are able to fit a lot in a little bit of space. I will show you that in a little bit. I just have a small tray that's 10 by 14 versus a 10 by 20 tray, and I can fit far more brand new seedlings on a small 10 by 12, 10 by 14 tray than I can on a full 10 by 20. With soil blocks, if you have the right setup, it's real easy to pot up. Remembering potting up, that means when your plants are getting too big for the size of container that they're in, you need to put them in a bigger size container in order to let the roots grow. So the roots and the shoots is what it's called. The roots and the shoots grow somewhat together. When you have good root growth, you have good shoot growth. When you have good shoot growth, you have good root growth. That was a mouthful. Just understand that you need to pot up to bigger containers as the plant gets bigger. Now you don't want to go to too big of a container. There's reasons why. If you have too small of a container, it sucks up all the water too quickly. The plant's too big, it just drinks up all the water, and there's not very many nutrients in that small container. So you have to pot it up to get it in a bigger container for that reason. But why don't you just start in the big container is a good question. The reason why is because if you have a small seed or a tiny seedling in a huge container, you're often going to have too much water and too much moisture because the plant can't take away that moisture fast enough, and you'll end up with root rot or even something worse, a fungal disease called damping off. which will kill your seedlings. That looks like there's right at the base where your seedling meets the soil, there's going to be like a little pinch spot is what it looks like the plant's just wasting away right there where it meets the soil. It's actually a fungus, a damping off fungus, and it kills so many seedlings if they're overwatered. Typically is when that happens. Too much moisture in the environment. So those are the reasons why you don't want to have too big or too small of a container. With potting up on soil blocks, there's a little contraption that you can stick inside the larger soil block maker, which will allow the small soil blocks that we've made previously with all the smaller seedlings in there will fit right inside. And again, that'll make more sense when I'm able to show you what I'm talking about. One other pro that I think is huge is if you're selling or giving away, gifting some of your seedlings to people. I don't want to buy the nice, sturdy, reusable 6-cell trays and then give those away. They're just too expensive, and I bought them so I could reuse them. But I don't always have the cheap, flimsy ones around that I feel good about giving away to people. So with soil blocking, there's no container that you have to worry about getting back from them or buying and replacing because you gave it away. Soil blocks, you can just hand them the soil block with the plant in it, and they're good to go. They plop right in the soil. I forgot one other huge benefit of soil blocks. No matter how careful you are, when you transplant a plant from a container into the ground or a container into another pot, there's going to be some transplant shock. You're disturbing the plant, you're disturbing the roots, you're putting it from one home that it's used to into a different home that it's not used to. Transplant shock basically just is a period of time where your transplant slows down for a little bit, and it takes a while to catch back up and continue growing as quickly as it was before you took it out of the container. There's not any noticeable transplant shock as far as I can tell when I'm using soil blocks. So that's really great. There are some cons, however. So some people say that soil blocking is faster. For me, it's not. It takes a little bit more time. The main reason why it takes more time is because I have to make my own soil recipe, which is another con to doing soil blocks. There isn't, as far as I'm aware, there's no soil mix out there that's good and works well with soil blocking. I've tried half a dozen different soil mixes, and then I've also tried half a dozen different recipes that I found. I've experimented enough with one that I found that I really like. It's from a YouTube gardener called Nature's Always Right. That's his YouTube channel. I did a test for, like I said, with about a half a dozen different soil block recipes, and I had the best success with his. I want to give full disclosure, full credit. I don't know him personally, but his recipe is what I had the most success with. I'll see if I can post some of the results from my testing that I did last year. Some of them got moldy, some of them had terrible germination rates. His had the highest germination rates, no mold, and the quickest growth. But again, it's not faster for me because I do have to spend the time buying the ingredients, mixing the ingredients together, and I'm used to using 6-cell trays with a prepackaged Jiffy peat mix or something like that, where I have it in a container that's all ready to go. All I have to do is scoop up the 6-cell tray, pat it in there, firm it in there just a little bit. Boom, I'm done with 6 already. No mixing of stuff, no packing it in, no getting the moisture just right, like you have to do with soil blocks. Soil blocks do tend to dry out faster, which in my climate, I live in the desert zone, Utah, Salt Lake City, Utah, and it is very dry air here, especially during the winter when you're typically starting your seeds. So soil blocks tend to dry out really fast here. If I have them in my greenhouse, sometimes I'm having to water them twice a day. If I have them inside in my grow tent or just growing in a room inside my house, I can go a little bit long. I can water them once a day without having them dry out, but that is something to keep in mind. Speaking of watering, when you do water soil blocks, I'll show you how to water them to do it safely, because since it is just a block of soil that's compressed without having any container holding its shape, if you water it with a watering can or like a hose like you're used to, it's just going to wash away and kind of turn it all into a big muddy mess, and it's not going to work. So the first week or two you have until roots grow, until some of them, microscopic life grows and holds the soil block together a little bit better. You have to be careful of basically bottom watering it so it can soak up the moisture as it needs in the soil block, and that's how you water soil blocks. Those are some of the pros and cons. That's not everything. It's not all-inclusive list, but that's a few of the things I wanted to discuss. So with that said, I'm going to show you how I do soil blocks. So here are my 2 soil blockers. You can see clearly they're different sizes. Some things I want to point out. If you look inside this one, you can see the little dimples inside of each one of these. That dimple is there for your convenience. That's where you can place your seed once you've got the soil block made. The other thing I wanted to point out was with this bigger 2-inch block, this is a 1/2-inch block maker, this is a 2-inch block maker. So inside here, you can see that square. That is the same size square as these. When I was talking about potting up, that's what I was referring to. You can make the new soil blocks out of this bigger one, because because you've got all your tiny seedlings growing out of these soil blocks. You can just take the small soil block, put it inside the larger soil block that you made. It's got that square indentation already in it. Pops right in there, fits in. You can snug it in there if you want to, and you're done. That's potting it up. Now for soil blocking, you can also switch out these in case you want to just start with a 2-inch block. You can put these in place of the square part and have the little dimple for a place where you can put your seed. For soil blocks, I'll put the recipe that I followed here, again, from Nature's Always Right. This is the one I've liked the best. But you have to get this pretty wet. Practice is the best way to just kind of get a feel for it. But it's definitely more moist than you would do regular seed starting with. And the reason why is because you need that extra water in there and the surface tension with the water. Sorry, I'm jiggling the camera so much. You need the extra surface tension from the water to help hold the soil block together, help it hold its shape. So I can kind of take it, it's starting to hold its shape. I'm gonna just stick it in there. So we're getting close. You can tell it's definitely wet. I think we're gonna go a little bit more water than that. Again, it's something that's just trial and error, you'll get used to it. But definitely more water than I originally thought it would take. Okay, yeah, now we're getting there. It's starting to really hold its shape. I can even toss it around a little bit and it's holding its shape for the most part. So we're gonna call it good with that. To load this up, I'm gonna start by pushing it in there. And then learn this trick from Blossom and Branch Farm, watching her YouTube videos. She uses one of these putty knives. Just trying to make sure I've got it evenly in there in all of the squares. Got it packed in there tight. I'm pushing down at the same time as I'm pushing on this, which is going to push the soil blocks out. It takes a little bit of practice when you're new at it. But there you go. I've got 5, 10, 15, 20 soil blocks made just like that. I'll do another round here. I've got a bunch of petunia seeds that a friend gave me that I'm going to be planting and doing some experiments with. I'll go over that in a minute. Pushing down. Epic fail. I'm going to show you this bigger soil block. I don't know how many petunia seeds I have exactly, and I have a bunch that I'm going to be doing in 6-cell trays so I can do some other experiments as well. But it's the same concept. Just push it in there. Got it packed in there nice and tight. Push nice and firm. Like that. You can see those squares. I pick one of those up. It fit right in there just perfectly. That's the bigger one. You can see they do hold together. But I'm going to make some more small ones actually. You can see I didn't line them up very well, but in just a matter of minutes I was able to make 20, 40, 80 mini soil blocks right now. And I can go ahead and drop the seeds in them at this point, but I need to go wash my hands first so I can handle the seeds a little bit better. So this part does go really fast. If you take into consideration the time it took to make the soil mix, following the recipe, putting stuff together. If I were to be able to make a huge batch of this because I did a huge amount of seeds, then this would definitely be faster. But I'm averaging about 1,000 to 1,500 seeds a year is all. So for me, making the 6 cells versus using these soil blockers, the time component of it is not that big of a factor to me. So I've got these petunia seeds that a friend of mine gave to me. And something interesting about these seeds that I want to talk about real quick is clearly they don't look like natural seeds. They look like little tiny yellow BBs. The reason they are like that is because they are coated. Some seeds are so fine and tiny that some seed manufacturers put a coating on them that make them a little bit easier to see and a little bit easier to handle. Some of the companies even boast that they put nutrients and other things that will help retain moisture, which will aid in seed germination, etc. But I can't speak to the efficacy of that. I've never been able to notice a difference. However, it does make it easier to hold and handle and to see. Clearly, you can see these a lot better than a tiny brown seed that you may drop somewhere and not be able to find. I'm going to go ahead and put one of these in each one of these soil blocks. I've got a 72 cell tray sitting there ready for me to drop some seeds in as well. I'd like to see which one does better and which one has better growth. You know, it's not a fair comparison. This is not a completely true scientific experiment by any stretch of the imagination, because this is a different soil recipe than what's going to be in my 6 cell trays out there. For the purposes of my goals, I want to understand which is going to be better, which one's going to grow better, which one's going to be better overall for the longevity of the plant. And I'll do an update later on in the season when the flowers have grown bigger and started blooming, just to see where we're at and see if there's any noticeable difference. I'll catalog that as we go along the way, and I'll keep you updated. But again, I just want to see if there's much of a difference between this versus the 6 cell trays. I'll go ahead and plant these, and we can see that I decided to put 2 seeds in each one of them, because I didn't realize how many petunia seeds my friend gave me. So the next step is each one of these little dibbles, you got to cover the petunia seed with some soil. So I sprinkled over each one of the seeds, gently patting it down so it makes contact with the soil, so it can make sure that seed gets the moisture it needs in order to germinate. All right, I've got those all buried up, but one thing I wanted to point out is this is obviously a little bit cumbersome dealing with these small soil blocks. Anything from a 1.5 inch to 2 inch block, you'd be just fine starting out with those. But if you're going for quantity, the small 1/2 inch soil blocker is the way to go. I normally just use my bigger one and start directly into those. It's not nearly as cumbersome to work with. The soil blocks stay together a little bit better and just easier to work with overall. So as far as watering soil blocks, this is how it goes. Basically, you don't want to water directly onto them at all. That'll just wash them away. So you're gonna come a little ways away from them and gently pour some water in. I can't see how full my bucket is. Pour some water in to where they're kind of resting and sitting in the water. Then through capillary action, they'll soak up the water they need until they're wet and fully saturated. And then you'll just dump out all the excess water. I like to dump it out into my compost bin, or my compost pile, I should say. That's it. I mentioned a few minutes ago that I have an experiment I want to do. So with this same set of petunia seeds, I have 3 different rows that I want to try something different with. So I'm going to keep this one just how it is. This one, I'm going to water the fresh seeds with a product that I love to use. It's called Holganix. It has a bunch of bacteria and mycorrhizal fungi. Over 800 species of bacteria are in there. And then in this final row, there's I want to do some worm extract from my own worm castings. So I'm going to make up a batch of worm extract. It's similar to compost tea or worm compost tea, but it's extract. You're not actually brewing or bubbling or air bubbling the tea. You're just going to agitate briskly the worm castings and then screen off all of the solid parts, and then just use the liquid extract. And when you're agitating it really and shaking it really well, that actually knocks off a bunch of the bacteria and gets it into the solution. So I'm going to try those 3 things and see what kind of differences there is on germination and then growth after the germination. And I will keep you updated with that as well. Here's the regular water. All right, I mixed up a batch of the Holganix, and that was for this center row. I'm going to use both hands because I'm not left-handed. Again, this is the one full of 800 plus microbes, whether that be bacteria or mycorrhizal fungi, all which are designed, or not designed, but all which are meant to help the plant be able to get the nutrients that it needs. Here is the worm compost extract. So I'm going to be doing all of these inside my grow tent down in my basement. I want a little bit more of a controlled environment for this experiment. And like I said, I'll keep you updated. The different solutions that I use to water these for this first time, I wanted to point out that I'm planning on doing that just for this first time. Basically, my idea is that I'm inoculating the seeds with these different bacteria, whether it be from the Holganix or from my own worm compost extract. And then I have the control group, obviously, that has just nothing different as far as watering it this first time. I think this is going to be a fun one. I'll keep you updated as things change. If you're into videos like this and you like this sort of thing, then please make sure you like and subscribe. I put out new content all the time. I had a little bit of a slow spot recently because I got some new computer software that I'm learning how to edit with, and things are just taking me a little bit of time. I was sick for a little bit, but I plan on pumping out more content now that I'm getting back into the swing of things. So please be sure to subscribe, then you'll know when I come out with new stuff.